Hello, my name is Beverly Black. Thank you very much for joining me. This is my very first live chat, my live streaming, and I'm a little bit nervous. But anyway, this is an open forum. You can ask any question you want about immigration law. I have prepared a topic on how people could possibly lose their U.S. citizenship, and I did that just in case you know, nobody shows up, which is very possible, or they show up but they don't have any questions. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. Again, my name's Beverly Black. I've been an immigration attorney since 1992. I worked in the field before that as a para since 1986. So that means a couple of things. Number one, it means I'm old, but it also means that I have a lot of knowledge about immigration law. And that whole time that I've been an attorney, I've been a member of ALA, the American Immigration Lawyers Association. I feel very strongly that if you're going to hire an immigration attorney, excuse me, if you're going to hire an immigration attorney, that person should be a member of the American Immigration Lawyers Association. Because if not, they don't really take themselves seriously as an immigration attorney. I have a very dear friend of mine, lives out in the burbs, and he's a Spanish speaker, as am I. And he used to castigate me all the time. He'd be like, Bev, you are so missing the boat. You're missing the boat. You're a Spanish speaker. You should be doing things to help whatever a Spanish speaker needs help with. Have it be a criminal matter, have it be family law, landlord tenant. You're missing the boat. All these things you could be doing. And I never said it to him personally, but I always thought, yeah, but that means I'm not good at anything. I wanted to be good at immigration law, which I think I am. Full disclosure, my immigration practice has always been focused on deportation defense, family immigration, humanitarian immigration, such as asylum, TPS, Violence Against Women Act, which, by the way, doesn't mean it's just the woman who's being abused by her husband. It can be a man being abused by his wife. In fact, I had two different men that became permanent residents based on VAWA. But anyway, back in the day, way back in the day, I did lots of labor certifications and H's and L's, but I didn't really like them. It's not my cup of tea. So basically, I steer clear of the business visas, and I would just refer them out to other people. But naturalization is something that I know a fair amount about. I've had 0 clients who have lost their naturalization, lost their citizenship or renounced their citizenship. So it's not a very common thing to have happen, but there are ways. If, for instance, if you were born here and you wanted to give up your citizenship, there's a specific way you're going to do that. And I'm going to talk about that. That's the first topic coming up. In fact, at the end of this video, I'm going to talk about famous people that you're going to recognize many of the names that have given up their U.S. citizenship. And spoiler alert, this is why I need to edit my videos. I'm not sure about this whole live streaming thing, but spoiler, oh wait, pucha. Spoiler alert is that usually the reason that they were giving up their citizenship was for tax purposes. However, there was one guy, I think he was related to, Princess, what the heck was her name? She was from Monaco. Grace Kelly. Grace Kelly's son gave up his U.S. citizenship. He had gotten that because obviously he was the son of a U.S. citizen. And that was so that he was a prince, so that he could take over. He could have that role as the Prince of Monaco. We should all have such problems, right? Okay, so let's get into it a little bit about what it means to give up your U.S. citizenship. Well, there's basically, you can't, if you were born here, you can't just accidentally give up your U.S. citizenship. This is, it's one of the things that's driving me nuts about our dear leader, who keeps, I don't know what problem he has with Rosie O'Donnell, but, a few months back, he was constantly talking about how he's going to take her citizenship away from her. Well, you can't do that. Just because somebody doesn't like you doesn't mean you're going to lose your U.S. citizenship. You have to basically do it one of two ways. You either have to renounce your citizenship, or you have to voluntarily do something with the intention of giving up your citizenship. So it's never by accident, and it's never because somebody, even someone as powerful as the president, decides that he doesn't like you and he's going to take your citizenship away. That's just him being him. So how do you renounce your U.S. citizenship? One is, you normally do this, not normally, like all the time. You generally have to be outside the country, and you go to a U.S. consulate. The U.S. consulate is basically the United States government abroad. So if you're traveling and you have a problem, then you can go to the U.S. consulate. It's as if you're going to your own government back home. So you need to plan a date. You don't just want to pop in and say, "Hi, I'm here to renounce my citizenship." You want to plan a date to go talk to them. You have to appear in person before a consular or a diplomatic officer. There's forms, of course, you have to fill out. There's a DS 4079. That's a questionnaire about your background and your intent to renounce. There's also a DS 4080. That's an oath of renunciation. That's basically to CYA for the government and make sure that you really know what you're doing and that you really want to do this. You're also going to need some kind of identity documentation, which is probably going to be your passport, could be a birth certificate or some other proof of U.S. citizenship. Normally, there's going to be 2 interviews with the consular officer, and that person's job is to make sure the renunciation is voluntary and that you understand what you're doing, which I'm going to touch on that. Some of the things you should be thinking about this. If, you hear this with every election, somebody says, if so-and-so becomes president, I'm leaving the country. Well, there's a big difference between leaving the country and renouncing your citizenship. Although you'll see at the end of this little talk, there's a bunch of people that actually did renounce their citizenship mainly because they were unhappy about things that were happening politically in this country. So you have to take the oath of renunciation, and surprise, surprise, you have to pay a fee, a renunciation fee. Well, how much do you think the renunciation fee is? If you decide that you don't want to be a U.S. citizen anymore, how much do you think it costs in November of 2025? Well, I'll tell you, it's $2,350. They get you coming and going, right? That's the current tax, but you'll have to check it. If you're watching this a couple of years from now, you're going to have to double check that price. So the fee is paid at the embassy or the consulate during your appointment. Then you're going to have to wait for something that's called a certificate of loss of nationality. And the U.S. Department of State is going to review your case. They actually open up an investigation and make sure that all their T's are crossed and their I's are dotted. You also have to file an IRS Form 8854, which, according to my research, says that's called the initial and annual expatriation statement to certify that you met your U.S. tax obligations for the past 5 years. There's an exit tax. And even after renouncing, you have to keep in mind, even after renouncing your citizenship, you still have U.S. income tax obligations for certain types of U.S. sourced income. So you want to get a tax expert involved, someone who really is sophisticated and knows, can give you the proper information as to, you think you're going to give up your citizenship and boom, now you don't have to pay taxes. That might not be true. By the way, if you're getting some information from this that you enjoy, if this is helpful for you, I'd appreciate you subscribing. Hit like. If you want to share it with somebody, maybe you were just talking to somebody who said they thought they were thinking about going back to their home country or back to their mother's country or wherever and giving up their citizenship. If you think it could be useful to somebody else, please share it. So some of the important things you need to think about before you make this big step. One is that basically it's irreversible. Once you've renounced your citizenship and it's been approved, it's very, very difficult to reverse. Another issue is you don't want to become stateless. Do you have another citizenship? Sometimes people are dual citizens. So you give up one citizenship, but you still have, let's say you're also a citizen of Israel, or you're a citizen of Italy or Ireland. You don't want to become stateless because that has its own list of problems that could happen. Another thing is you can't just come back to the States if you feel like it. You need to get a visa just like everybody else. And you can't use that U.S. passport anymore either. That's obvious. But you're going to need a visa to come back. And just like most people know that have any experience with immigration law, it's not always easy to get a visitor's visa to come back here or a business visa to come back here. And I didn't see this in any of my research, and there was nothing that pointed to it, but just having done this for so many years, I can tell you, if you go to the consul, let's say you've been living in Singapore and you decide, my sister's having a baby, I'm going to go back, or somebody's getting married. You have to go ask for a visa. And just knowing human nature and knowing how punitive people can be, that U.S. consular officer might not want to give it to you. If you have so little respect for U.S. citizenship that you just decided to throw it away, they might not want to give you a visitor's visa to come back. So you need to think about that. And again, you want to talk to an accountant who has dealt with this before, not just any old accountant, but you want somebody who knows about tax implications for expatriates. So anyway, that's the most common way that someone born here would lose their citizenship. That's voluntary renunciation. The second way is that, I'm sorry, I have to read all this, but what was the other way? Oh, voluntarily and intentionally giving it up. That's if you do something. I guess this is what Trump is talking about with Rosie O'Donnell, that she has done things and intentionally has done things intentionally, and for that reason, he thinks that she has given up her citizenship. That's not necessarily the case. You can't just accidentally do something and you didn't have any intention of giving up your citizenship. Like, what am I talking about? That could be you go and work for a foreign government. You're in Saudi Arabia and you start working for the government over there. That could be an issue for you. It's not cool to do that. I'm sorry. See, if I was editing this, this would be very easy. I could just cut through all this stuff. But so there's things like that. Let's say you decide to go fight for another country. Let's say you were originally from country X and they now are at war with their enemy and you want to go, let's say Ukraine. Let's say you're Ukrainian, or you feel very strongly that that you should be able to go over there and fight for Ukraine against Russia. That could be seen as something that you intentionally did. Basically, that could be a cause to have the U.S. Department of State start an investigation about you. So we're going to talk about naturalization in a second, but I wanted to run by some of these names. I swear you're going to know some of these people who renounced their citizenship. So the first one you're going to recognize, I'll bet you most people will recognize. His name is Eduardo Saverin. I believe he was Brazilian. If you saw, I should have looked this up ahead of time. But if you saw the Social Network, he was one of the co-founders of Facebook. And he ended up renouncing his citizenship in 2011 before the IPO, reportedly to avoid $700 million in capital gains taxes. But he stated that he just wanted to live and work in Singapore. Yul Brynner, another very famous actor. Yul Brynner gave up his citizenship in 1965. He played the King of Siam in The King and I, the bald guy, and the one who years later would do commercials about stop smoking. That's Yul Brynner. He gave up his citizenship in 1965 to avoid tax penalties. He had overstayed his work abroad and was facing heavy IRS fines. John Templeton. Name's familiar. Didn't really know who he was. He was an investor, or might still be, and philanthropist. He renounced in 1964. Some sources say it was for tax minimalization, but he simply said he wanted to go live in the Bahamas. Josephine Baker. Does that name sound familiar? She was an entertainer, and she renounced her U.S. citizenship when she became French in 1937. And it also states that she was disillusioned with racism. She was a Black woman. She was disillusioned with the racism in the U.S., refused to perform for segregated audiences, and became a French resistance agent. Tina Turner. I'm sure you recognize that name. She had lived in Switzerland for decades, and then she finally renounced her U.S. citizenship in 2013. And she just said that she had felt more at home in Switzerland than she did in the U.S. So she decided to become a Swiss citizen. Who else? Anybody else you might know? Some of these people I didn't know, like Gary Davis. Never heard of him. And I was born in 1957. He was a peace activist who declared himself a citizen of the world. And he renounced his citizenship to advocate for global government and the rejection of nationalism. Joel Slater, another one I didn't know, he renounced in 1987 to protest U.S. foreign policy, especially the Reagan-era bombing, and he even made himself stateless. Thomas Glenn Jolly, he was an anti-Vietnam War activist. He renounced U.S. citizenship in Canada after refusing induction in protest of the U.S. military policies. Josephine Baker. Didn't I just say Josephine Baker? Yes, I did. So we're going to skip right over her. Henry James, the novelist, Henry James, he renounced U.S. citizenship in 1915 as protest against U.S. policy. And that was, his move was partially political over the fact that the U.S., U.S. neutrality in World War I. I seem to recall we fought in World War I, so that doesn't make any sense. John Huston, sound familiar? Very famous film director. He renounced in 1964. He left Hollywood, expressed contempt for McCarthyism and the House Committee on Un-American Activities, and settled in Ireland. This person, I have no idea who it is, but you might. The name is Denise Richard. Denise. See, you don't know how much editing goes into videos until you watch somebody's live stream. Anyway, this woman's name is Denise Rich. She's a socialite and songwriter. She gave up U.S. citizenship in 2011. She reportedly did this to help her avoid large tax liabilities. And she said she was tied to her lifestyle in Europe. Maria Callas. I was surprised by that. That's opera singer. There was just a show, I think, on Netflix about her. She dropped her U.S. citizenship in 1966 when she reassumed her Greek nationality. W.E.B. Du Bois, very famous civil rights leader and scholar. He renounced his U.S. citizenship in 1963 after moving to Ghana. And he was another one who was disillusioned and upset about the racial policies in the United States. Terry Gilliam, I had to actually look him up because it says member of Monty Python. So I looked him up. It doesn't look familiar to me. Of course, I wasn't a huge fan of Monty Python anyway. I think I was a little bit too young for Monty Python. But he renounced his U.S. citizenship in 2006. He criticized U.S. policies, especially post 9/11, calling the climate frightening, and also cited estate tax concerns. So there's all that. Now, naturalization for denaturalization. First of all, you have to understand that denaturalization is civil, not criminal. There is a way to do it criminally, but it's extremely rare. So we'll just talk about your typical civil denaturalization. That's going to begin with the Department of Justice or the Department of Homeland Security, because those departments believe that the person gained naturalization illegally or fraudulently. Common grounds include concealing a material fact during the immigration or naturalization process, willful misrepresentation, meaning lying about your criminal activity, identity, past immigration violations. I'm old enough to remember when there were a number of people who had been Nazis during World War II, and they got their butts denaturalized. They were denaturalized and then deported. We haven't had one of them for a number of years because most of those folks have died out. But even to this day, in the naturalization application, there's a question: have you ever been a Nazi? And how they were able to denaturalize those people is that if they had checked off, no, not me, I was never a Nazi, and then it comes out that yes, he was a Nazi, he worked here, he worked there. Well, in that case, because you lied about something that was very material. And when they talk about lying about a material fact, that would be a fact that when you lie about it, you then close the door on other questions that might lead to reasons why the government wouldn't want to approve your case. This is true also of permanent residence, not just of citizenship. For instance, let's say you were married back home, and then you came here, met somebody, and married her here. So you're in a bigamous marriage. So you got your permanent residence through a bigamous marriage, which is unlawful. It's fraudulent. Well, not only can, and then you decide to naturalize, and because you're married, you do it the 3-year way, right? Because you're married to a U.S. citizen. Well, you can get not just denaturalized. Normally, when you're denaturalized, you go back to whatever status you were in before. But if you were in that status, such as a permanent resident, unlawfully as well, you go back to nothing, and you're going to end up getting deported. So be very careful. I say this all the time to all my clients and on just about every video I do. Don't lie to the government. They're probably going to figure it out sooner or later. So don't lie to the government. So that it also might be another common ground is membership in a terrorist group or some group that has persecuted other people, like I would assume if you're a member of Hamas, but you swear on a stack of Bibles or a stack of Qurans that you weren't, that would be a grounds to denaturalize you. Now, another reason, extremely rare, I'm sure, is refusing to testify in a national security proceeding. I can't even think of an example. I should have done that before I started this video, but I can't even think of, what would be a national security proceeding. But if you refuse to testify in it, you're in big trouble. So what happens? The DOJ, that's the Department of Justice, they file, which is not the Department of Homeland Security, okay? Keep that straight. Department of Homeland Security is the department that has USCIS, it has the Border Patrol, and it has ICE. But the Department of Justice has EOIR, which is the Executive Office of Immigration Review, also known as Immigration Court. So it's going to be some kind of a suit against you by the Department of Justice, and they'll file a complaint in a federal district court against you. It's a whole procedure. It's not like, there's so much talk on YouTube and across social media in general about, oh my God, can I lose my citizenship? Oh my God, oh my God. Well, it's a whole big, long procedure. I'm not saying you wouldn't lose it, but it's not going to happen overnight. They're not going to grab you up, take care of, denaturalize you like overnight and send you off to some other place. However, if he thinks he can do it, he might try and do it because he's already tried to do it with multiple people. There's been a number of people who are U.S. citizens who have been deported just because they don't believe the fact. The guy's walking around with his U.S. passport, and ICE says, no, I don't believe it. It's bogus. That's a fake passport. That's a fake U.S. citizen, fake U.S. birth certificate. And they, it's the old act first, ask questions later. So, but getting deported and getting denaturalized are two very different things, because as we've seen, sometimes people can be brought back. So anyway, the DOJ files a complaint in federal district court against you. You would receive a copy of the lawsuit. You're allowed to file a defense, an answer to that. And you absolutely have to hire an attorney and appear in court don't just blow that off. This is no small thing. You need to have an attorney and you need to show up for all of your court hearings. The federal court will review the case. The government has to prove its case by clear and convincing evidence. That's the highest standard that's the highest standard we have. Clear, convincing, and unequivocal. Oh my God. I'm going to have to see if there's a way I can edit this thing. So the standard is clear, convincing, and unequivocal evidence. It's like I said, the highest standard we've got. So what's the court going to look at? They're going to look at whether or not you received your citizenship illegally or fraudulently. If the fraud was material, as in that it would have changed the outcome. For instance, if you were married to two people at the same time, they're going to look to see if you were eligible for naturalization at the time. Maybe you applied for it too early. Maybe you had, there was some other issue that you weren't actually able to, let's say you weren't actually able to pass the civics test or the English test. I'm just going to say this real brief. I knew this guy who, I'm not going to say what nationality it is because a lot of people in Philly would know this person, but he worked for a community group that was part of his nationality. And so he was often the translator that went with them to immigration, to either, because it wasn't Spanish. Okay, it was a language that most officers, immigration officers, wouldn't know. So you have to bring your own interpreter. Well, he would be the interpreter. And I remember him saying that he has gone many, many times. He told me this 20 years ago. He said, I've gone to many, many naturalization interviews with people. We don't have, the attorneys. My community group does the naturalization for them. And then I'll go with them as the interpreter. And he looked at me out of the side of his eye and he kind of smiled and he says, I've never had anyone fail. It's that kind of stuff. You can't just have a friend who's going to interpret for you and you're saying one answer, but they're giving the correct answer. You can't do that. That would be called fraud. So the judge will eventually issue a decision. No clue. I have no idea how long these cases take. If you want to contact me and you have an issue about that and you want to know how long this is going to take, you pay the consultation fee. My consultations are $200 per hour. You pay the consultation fee. I'll be more than happy to research it and even research it in whatever area you're from, because how long it takes in Philly might be different from how long it takes in Miami. Before I forget, let me give you my my phone number and my email. My email, because I'm a Spanish speaker, and I used to do a column called La Migra y Tú. I did that for many, many, many years. It was in many Spanish language newspapers. So my email is lamigraytu@gmail.com, which is spelled L-A, migra, M, like in Michael, I-G-R-A-E, which is a capital Y, and then a capital T-U. It just means immigration and you in Spanish. So that's my email, lamigraytu@gmail.com. And my phone number, which is not my personal number, but let me give you the phone that I'm using just for YouTube people. That's 267-269-6155. Feel free to call me. A lot of times over the course of my life, I've answered many, many calls and have lost a lot of consultation money because I basically give people a free couple of minutes, 2, 3, 4 minutes. We could talk for 5 minutes, but if it gets past 5 minutes, I'm going to want a consultation fee. But feel free if you have a quick question and you just want to ask me, I'll be more than happy to pick it up. I also do, I'm going to do a video pretty soon about why I'm different from all these other immigration attorneys that you see. And there's a lot of really great ones. One is Jim Hacking. I think he's great. In fact, the first time I saw him on YouTube, I'm like, I know that guy. I've seen that guy before. So he's probably very much involved with ALA and lecturing and stuff, because I know I've seen him before. McBean, she's good. In fact, McBean is the immigration attorney who always says, type in freedom now, freedom now, freedom now. And I'm like, what the heck is she saying? Type in freedom now for? That doesn't even make any sense. But then I had to look it up, because why would you say freedom now? That doesn't even make any sense for immigration. But apparently that was a big 1960s thing. And she's younger than me, so why she knows that, I don't know. And I didn't know it, but that was something that people used to say all the time. So I've decided that on these live streams, I'm going to ask people to type in fair laws for all. That makes more sense. Don't have one set of laws for one group of people and another set of laws for others. So if you agree with me, type in fair laws for all. And by the way, also put in where you're from, because I'd love to know. That's just my curiosity. I'd love to know where you're living. And if you have any questions, well, see, let me double check this. I don't think there's anyone here. There is no one here. I've been on for 36 minutes and there's nobody here. So I was going to go into the whole spiel about how you ask a question, but since there's no one here to ask a question, I won't bother. But we'll do that next time. I'm going to do these live streams every Sunday at 10 o'clock in the morning. Unless people are complaining and they say, this is a really horrible time because we're always at church. Or, we're on the West Coast and 10 o'clock in the morning is too early for us to be expected to do that. I think it's important to have a regular time to do live streams. I know some people, and in fact, I think Jim Hacking is one of them, that just sort of goes up on live stream when he gets a couple of minutes. I don't know. He has enough clients that he can do. He has enough subscribers that he can do that. I have very few subscribers, which is why I'm asking people, if you find this interesting, if you've gotten any value out of it whatsoever, hit subscribe so that you can. You won't miss any of the content that I put out. Generally speaking, I do 3 videos a week, 2 about immigration itself, either the substantive part of the law or the procedural part of the law. I also do some kind of quiz once a week. I was doing, in fact, I still am doing the naturalization quizzes. It started as just 10 questions where you had to try and get 6 right. But just recently I've switched it up to 20 questions because USCIS has decided to increase the number of questions next year that you're going to have to answer. It used to be 10, you had to get 6 right. Now it's going to be 20, you have to get 12 right. I just did a whole video about don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. You should be able to be asked 60 questions, 80 questions, 100 questions, and you should be able to have them all right because you need to know all those answers. All right, back. Before you can get denaturalized, you have to be naturalized first. Anything else? Denaturalization. So that's basically, they're going to do that through federal court. And like I said, it's not an overnight thing. It's going to take a while. But from the minute you get any whiff of the fact that you might have a complaint filed against you for denaturalization, start saving your pennies because it's going to cost you some money. This isn't going to be Joe Blow, immigration attorney who just got out of law school last year. This is going to be a gym hacking. This is going to be somebody who has a lot of experience in this area, and expect to pay for that experience. So I think that's it, and it's 40 minutes I've been on, and nobody has shown up. Has anybody shown up? Nobody has shown up. So disappointing. But I thought, you know what? It's your first live stream. You only have 49 subscribers, Bev. Don't expect to get a whole bunch of people. And plus, I didn't promote it very well. I did it on the community tab. I'm still trying to figure out the community tab because it doesn't show up on my other accounts that I have subscribed to this one too. So I don't even know how the community tab works, but I should be announcing it more often. So it's going to be Sunday mornings at 10 o'clock. And if there's something that you would say, I would love to have you talk about whatever, what's going on with the EADs? We used to always get like 500 days or something. We applied for this and we didn't have to reapply for a long time. They took forever to get EADs, that's employment cards, employment authorization documents, to get them processed. Well, they've done away with that. So just a heads up, if you're not, if you've applied for permanent residence and you've gotten an EAD, a work card, but they're taking forever to get your interview, guess what? Make sure you apply the day you can apply to renew it, because they take forever to renew your EAD, which is why they gave extra days before that. I mean, they gave months and months because they didn't want people complaining that this is taking too long. Well, guess what? Apparently, the Trump administration doesn't care if people complain, and they just took all that away. So that was a topic I was going to talk about. So email me or leave a message. Actually, it'd be better just to leave a comment below about what kind of live streams you'd like me to talk about. Because I just figured these were going to be open forums and people would ask me whatever questions they had. But if like today, maybe next week, I don't have anybody again. So I'm going to have a topic. If there's something that you think that you would like to learn more about, leave a comment below and just let me know. That would be great. Okay? And I know there's nobody here at 42 minutes and 45 seconds. I know there's nobody here, but I'm hoping that there's going to be some people who watch it when it's replayed. And I hope to see more people next Sunday at 10 o'clock in the morning, Eastern time, because I'm not in Philly precisely. I'm in the burbs of Philly. But anyway, so if you've gotten this far and you've actually watched the replay, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And I hope to see you live next time.